Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Monday, October 20th, 2024. Just gonna be honest with this awkward time of starting AM reading videos, and yes, this is actually the first time I've done an AM reading video in a couple of months. I mean, technically speaking, these videos are where I give a little bit of a recap of what I've been reading recently, and technically my last video was a reading wrap-up, which is kind of the same thing, but just slightly different, and I'm hoping to make a few more of these throughout the month. What's left of it anyway. I guess this is technically supposed to be a little more off the cuff. I was kind of hoping to be a little more scheduled weekly, but I am just glad to be a little bit back in the saddle. And I'm going to start this video the way I start my usual AM reading videos, by talking about a short story. And I am currently reading from Michigan Quarterly Review, the Winter 2024 edition, picking it up, for the first time in 2 months. And the short story I read this week is a long title, What Would I Do for You? What Would You Do for Me? By Emma Binder. And this story follows a young man called Cody who has come home to his hometown in rural Wisconsin. His father has bad cancer and he's helping out there. And from the off you can tell there's a bit of tension here, where he is nervous about being recognized, especially by the men in his community. And there might even be a little tension with his father, but because his father is ill, it doesn't really flare up into much. And the major action of the story starts when Cody is at a frozen lake, and he sees a man, fall under the ice, and he goes and rescues this man and brings him to his car and tries to encourage him to go to the hospital. The man's acting all macho and I don't need any help. But it turns out that Cody put his jacket and all on the man, and so ultimately the man has to search him out to return it. And he also does say, thank you for helping me, so maybe we could go to the bar together and I could introduce you to some of my friends. And I think by this point, Cody's very nervous, and we understand, implicitly that he is a trans man. So he's returning to his hometown, but, he was, a significantly different person at the time. And so he goes to this bar, and there is some great tension there, especially with one of the friends is somebody from Cody's graduating year, and this guy keeps on, sort of pressing, really, how can't I remember you? And there's just, some stereotypically, but I don't feel like too badly done, sort of, benchmarks about sort of the, markers of, toxic male behavior, constant drunkenness and, constant competitiveness and that sort of thing that might, indicate that these people from a small rural town might not be the safest people to, realize that Cody is trans. But, I thought that, there were great details and the tension was pretty well done. And it does ultimately end with, he insists, they insist that he plays one game of pool with them, and then he leaves, and there is one guy who follows him outside, and, the tension is still rising a little, but ultimately, it just turns into more of a thank you. And there is still that tension, looking into men's eyes, and, it always, at first it almost felt sexual, would he be scouted out by, the gay men of the community? And the word queer comes up a lot in here. But Cody is married to a woman, and he goes home. And actually his wife, who is not there with him, is another member of, former member of this small town in Wisconsin, and they now live in rural Massachusetts, where, there's inklings that Binder puts in, they have a good, decent life there, and friends and all of that. But in a way, thank goodness his wife wasn't actually with him, because maybe if somebody recognized her, I don't know. Yeah, that's basically the story, and it does end on like Cody returning to the lake, and like he's kind of trying to chase his own sort of macho attitude, in a way trying to feel like a man himself. And so, you know, it kind of touches upon, I guess, some sort of imposter syndrome and, you know, gender politics, and where you fit in, and you know, you come from a very certain place, probably with very stratified gender rules. The first book I read this month is Judaism Disrupted by Michael Strassfield, a Reconstructionist rabbi. I think it's a treatise about the 21st century. And I read this over the Jewish high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which took place earlier this month. It's sort of a thing I like to do for the high holidays, is read what's essentially a book on Jewish religious thought. Yeah, this is a recently published book where Strassfield, he's a recently retired Reconstructionist rabbi, ruminating on sort of how to live a Jewish life in the 21st century. And like he goes into, you know, traditional biblical sort of treatises on the things that Judaism focuses on about being a good person, you know, outwardly and inwardly to yourself, and how to live that lifestyle first in a world that is not at all like, you know, ancient Israel was in terms of, you know, the economy or anything else, but also, you know, he is a liberal person, does not believe, you know, in divinely inspired you know, Torah or anything like that. Like he believes in some sort of, you know, God that's larger than us, but, you know, not in a, you know, Sky Daddy sort of way either. So how do these precepts, you know, apply to, you know, how we can live our lives today, not believing in something, you know, quite so rigid, and trying to take the, I guess, broader ideas that he sees about, you know, living a life of purpose and intention, and trying to do the right thing. And so I thought it was pretty decently written, pretty easy to understand, although, you know, this is obviously a book that has probably limited appeal about how many people would be interested in it. And even for me, like, as much as I, you know, like these books, it's not, you know, the sort of narrative literature that usually draws me in. But there's a lot of little things to ruminate about. I remember reading something about, like, you know, giving to the poor, and like, you know, in the Torah there's some pretty strict rules about how to give to the poor, but, you know, it was a different society, a very agricultural society, and he's ruminating on, like, if you live in a big city, how do you give to the poor that way? How do you interact with, like, constant homeless people you might see, which, you know, is something that particularly sticks out to me in the reality that I live. And he talks a bit about, like, you know, his own life a little bit, and experiences, particularly in the chapters that are about, you know, sort of, you know, bolstering up, you know, a sense of internal purpose. And yeah, I'm glad I read this. I started reading it on Rosh Hashanah in the afternoons after services. I went down to this area of DC, the Wharf, and just sort of a place for me to sort of ruminate and unwind by the water. And I've been enjoying this sort of ritual for a while. And luckily the days were pretty nice. After a long period of rainy days, in fact, there were some pretty nice days to sit for hours in an outdoor environment even, which is just, you know, unusual and fortunate event, and to be able to ruminate on, you know, these issues of, you know, the life and universe and everything. So it was a pretty good way to start off the Jewish year. The second book I just finished is The Women of Rothschild, The Untold Story of the World's Most Famous Dynasty by Natalie Livingstone. This was a book I think I intentionally meant to read back in July, but better late than never, right? And it's kind of a nice way, I guess, with the last book and this book, I'm sort of, you know, transitioning out of the BookTube Prize and my nonfiction reading. In general, I read more fiction than nonfiction, but it was fun to stay, you know, in that genre for a while. And so anyway, this is a pretty impressive book. It spans a few hundred years, and it's trying to highlight the women of the Rothschild family from its very beginnings, when it became like a lucrative banking operation. Well, you know, starting with family members who lived in the Jewish ghetto in the 18th century in Hamburg, Germany. It primarily follows characters who ended up in England. The family grew large and like had a significant presence throughout a lot of Europe, and that's touched upon a little bit, but most of the women who are profiled here have some sort of English roots or come to England as they join the family. And, you know, it's a very impressive book. Obviously, she did a lot of research in mining diaries of these particular characters and of other people, and I guess other, you know, primary sources to flesh them out. But, you know, it is, I mean, I mentioned that it started in the, you know, 18th century, and it goes all the way to basically the end of the 20th century, as it were. Well, by that point, I guess, you know, the family had lost a little bit of its prominence, but I enjoyed it. I do feel like, you know, she was able to find some characters throughout this book who contributed greatly in different ways, like to Jewish emancipation in England, to the Zionist movement and the creation of Israel, to helping or attempting to help you know, impoverished Jews and others within England during the 19th and 20th centuries. There's always questions of identity as this family grew, you know, more prominent and more connected to, you know, prominent Anglicans, Queen Victoria, and everybody. Like, you know, what does Judaism even mean to them? So there were a lot of impressive people in this book, although I do feel like, you know, you can only spend so much time with them and they're kind of all crammed in there, so it can be kind of difficult to, you know, remember everything. It's kind of one of those types of books, but, you know, on an academic level, I was pretty impressed with the research. There was a sort of, I guess, English affectation, and, you know, obviously Livingstone primarily focused on, you know, the British Rothschilds, so in a way it felt a little lopsided that way too. But, you know, it's better to know a few people, you know, than know people. I guess you need some sort of entryway into this very broad family. And I do feel like there were some interesting ruminations on, like, how you start one way, as in, you know, in the ghetto, and how you continue to both experience Judaism, but also experience the realities of wealth, and how, you know, you start with, you know, the industry that you started in, but also, especially for the women, move into philanthropy, and ultimately, like at the, you know, mid to late 20th century, you know, there's people who can take on, you know, academic and professional sort of careers. And also, I guess, on how the world wars, I think, are really what took the Rothschild family out of prominence, because probably the economic stage changed a bit after the world wars, and America became more prominent, and they never really got a huge foothold financially in America. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things to ruminate on here. I do also have a novel that is based on one of the early Rothschild women, which I'm excited to read. I'm probably going to get to it next month, but glad to get this ball rolling. And finally, I am currently reading Long Island Compromise by Taffy Brodesser-Akner. And I'm ending on a little bit of a downer note, because I'm not enjoying this book as much as I hoped I would. It was definitely one of my most anticipated reads of the year, because I really liked her first novel, Fleischman is in Trouble, and was, you know, excited to see where she would go next. And I can see some similarities in, you know, the writing style, where she can lean a little bit into sort of a satirical milieu, but it worked a lot better for me in Fleischman. And I think that's because I feel like the premise of the story could be comedic, but it generally felt authentic and real to me. Like that, you know, it was about a particular subset of people, like upper class New York Jews. I know John Lovett, you know, made jokes about, you know, how relatable it was in terms of Jewish culture, and like for, you know, in that New York contemporary set. But ultimately, I feel like it stayed true to ideas of like who people are in terms of how they identify in marriage and career and that sort of thing. But this is just much more melodramatic and less real. Like we're starting with a man who was kidnapped in the 1980s, and the way that it's written, it's almost supposed to be lighthearted, so that when we return to the family, like at the 21st century, and he's still struggling about it, it's like, you know, how seriously am I supposed to take this? And it turns into well, it's a story about a very well-off family who ultimately lose all their money. It kind of reminds me of The Nest by what is Carolyn Sweeney, I think it was. Sort of the same conundrum, except that just ultimately these people don't feel, you know, as approachable. Like we're following all of the characters who are messed up in certain ways. Like Beamer is the screenwriter in Hollywood who's a complete druggie, and he like ends up at Mandy Patinkin's house. And like there's this whole scene where like everything bad is happening all at once, and I'm like, this just doesn't feel at all believable to me. Like she's just sort of, done a swan dive into satire that, you know, has become flattened to me. And that, I don't know, I'm not as enamored with this book as I hoped I would be. You know, I liked her writing style, and that, you know, there was sort of a quirky affectation, but I feel like, you know, with Fleischman, the characters and situations were much more challenging and real, where this one just feels like ridiculous soap opera so far. But I'm trying to hopefully find the good things in this, and hopefully I'll, you know, enjoy the rest of my reading and report back. And that wasn't so bad, right, Self? Hopefully I'll be able to do a couple more of these this month, but before I get to those, expect me back on this channel in the next couple of days for my BookTube spin, one of the TBR games I play, which in fact I've already pre-filmed it, so should be easy to get that out. Excited to share it. I know some people like to play that game as well. And even though we're more than halfway through the month, hopefully I'll be able to stay on my game. There's still plenty of more books I hope to get to before November, and I'll be able to talk about them, and stay tuned. I hope all of your reading endeavors are going well too. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.